Welcome to the eCommerce podcast with Matt Edmondson, a show that brings you regular interviews, tips, and tools for building your business online.
Let me take just a few seconds here to tell you about my brand new e-commerce course that is perfectly designed for those of you who are looking to build your own online business, right? I know it's going to work well for you guys because we deep dive into the process that I use to build my own e-commerce businesses. We're going to look at the 6 key elements that you need to be aware of for building a successful online store. I'm utterly convinced it'll make a huge difference to your business. I am super proud of it, let me tell you, and it is brand new for 2020. It's called the eCommerce Masterclass. You can check out what other people think about the course. You can find out more information on my site at mattedmondson.com. Well, hello and welcome to the e-commerce podcast with me, your host, Matt Edmondson. This is a show all about how to grow your online business. And every week, I get to speak to some really amazing people from the world of e-commerce. I get to ask them all kinds of questions about what they know and how it's going to help us develop online. Now, historically, we've had one guest per show, but being as this is the end of 2020 and the start, hopefully, of a very different 2021, we have been doing something a little bit different. What we have done is we've contacted our guests from the last 12 months. We have invited them back to talk about what lessons they have learned from 2020 that they are taking into 2021 and trying to figure out how that can help us with our own businesses, both in running the business, being an entrepreneur, being business people, but also growing our business online into 2021. And in today's show, we have part 1 of some great tips from people like Chloe Thomas. We've got Padraig Walsh. We've got Moyse. We have Nancy Badillo. We have Meyrick D'Souza, and we have Neil Roberts. Oh yes, this is a jam-packed episode for you that we have got in store. So you are definitely going to want to pay attention to all of this. Now, if you have a notebook, get it ready. But if you're in the car driving or for whatever reason you can't take notes right now, you'll be pleased to know that all of the notes from today's show will be available as a free download with links to all of the guests and what they're up to. All you've got to do is head on over to the website, ecommercepodcast.net/46 because we're on episode 46. So just ecommercepodcast.net/46 and it will take you straight to this page. Now, without further ado, should we jump in? I think we should. Let's get started with our very first guest today, Chloe Thomas, who, if you're a regular to the show, you'll know she is a regular to the show, if you get what I mean. Chloe is the host of the Keep Optimizing podcast, and she is always super generous with her expertise and knowledge. So here is an excerpt from my conversation with Chloe. What are you taking from 2020 into 2021?
Oh, that's a cracking question. So I think what I'm taking from 2020 into 2021, she says buying time to get the answer right, is that I think everything that the pandemic has thrown at us in the world of e-commerce, especially the world of e-commerce, actually no, the whole of the world of e-commerce, I think has made us better at our jobs. I think we've been forced to analyze better, to work out, whether your sales have gone through the roof or they've plummeted, it's really forced you to take a look at the results and work out what to do more of and what to stop doing. It's really forced us to look at our systems and go, oh dear God, that's horrendous. You hear about the high street guys who've survived the best through this, and it has been because they already had the systems in place that enabled them to dispatch from store, that enabled them to reroute customer service queries to the store staff.
Yeah.
So they could keep, as the web was going crazy, they could redeploy one of, for a high street business, probably your second biggest outlay is your team. And you could redeploy the team onto doing something, which quite frankly can only be good for team morale, let alone the bottom line of the company. So I think it's made us better in many, many ways in this industry and as business owners and marketers. And I hope we will continue that and continue improving on that as we go into whatever next year brings us. So we are able to move more flexibly, able to react better with less pain points and less issues, and able to be in a position where we can treat our customers and our staff better because we've got those systems in place, which of course will make it all a lot better in the long run. And I think one of the big themes which has come out across all of that for me is the needing to get to understand the customer better. It seems like there's people spending a lot more time on content and on social and on personas because they're trying to make sure they're appealing to the right customers, or if they've got massive sales, they're trying to work out how do we appeal to the right people because we can't market to everybody because we haven't got the stock. Or on the flip side of that, if the sales have gone down, it's how do we really get to understand our customers so we can start recovery. And I think that's what I'm taking into 21 is kind of a sense of hope and kind of loving the industry we're in, because I think we've really grown this year and I think we're moving, the future's looking really bright for e-commerce. And I think bright for retail overall, but I'm sure people shoot me for saying that one. But I think, this is just an acceleration of a rebalancing that was happening anyway. And the retailers who can create the great experiences and so forth will survive. There's still a place for the high street here.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Chloe, thank you very much. As usual, you've been an absolute legend.
My pleasure.
Always good to talk to you.
Indeed.
Well, big thanks again to Chloe. And if you haven't done so already, check out Chloe's new podcast. It is called Keep Optimizing. And in that show, she talks about all things e-commerce with some great guests. Even if I do say so myself, yes, I have been a guest on that show. Okay, so links to Chloe and her show will be in today's show notes that you can get for free. Just head on over to ecommercepodcast.net/46 and you'll be able to get those no problem. Now, next up is Padraig Walsh, who is our resident behavioral psychologist. Padraig has been on the show a number of times, including actually just in the last few weeks, as he shared his expertise and insight and knowledge and all wonderful things. So let's carry on that conversation. Here are some more tips and expertise from Padraig. If you think about 2020, I know some of us don't want to, but if we think about 2020, what have you learned? What are some of the big things that you're taking through into 2021?
I suppose one of the things, Matt, is this fear of the unknown. That I suppose for me, what astounded me was if we were sitting here in October, November 2019. And you outlined to me all of the things that were going to happen to humanity, to, globally, that there's no little island you can go to and escape all of this. Really, it's going to have some impact, that flights are going to be grounded, that shops are going to be closed, that people are going to die, people are going to get sick, schools are going to close for 6 months of the year, Coronation Street isn't going to be filming for 3 months of the year.
Heaven forbid. Forbid.
That the US presidential elections will have drive-through rallies, and that it will be absolutely dominated by this. I would say, God, I think the whole world is going to go into meltdown. You remember the volcanic ash? Do you remember that a few years ago where their flights were grounded for 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Worst thing that happened. We were going, what? Why can't we cope with this? Yet, I could count on one hand the number of people I know who have flown, been in an airplane this year, who have flown to a different place.
Yeah.
You just haven't been able to do that.
Yeah.
Yet at the same time, we're resilient. Mm-hmm. And the I suppose human resilience, human adaptability has been the thing that has struck me most about 2020. So it's a positive in one sense. When I was a teenager, I was like, I knew something had to happen in my lifetime. Look back
just going with the statistics, something.
Statistically, something's going to happen. There's been war, there's been famine, there's been bad shit that happens.
Yeah.
And we've had, I really, really hope that this is the major event of our time. I really, really do, that this was the major event, was a global pandemic. Yet, for the most part, on a day-to-day basis, you see people adapting, being resilient, being civil, being friendly with each other, helping each other out. There's always going to be elements of society that don't do that. But for the most part, what I've been astounded with in 2020 is our ability to adapt, to stay cheerful, to be resilient, and to have that flexibility to cope with massive changes in a very, very short space of time.
No, that's a brilliant answer. And I've loved it. I've loved I've not loved the pandemic, don't get me wrong, but I have loved how the majority of humans have responded, and just put their hearts out there and just started to care and help people. It's been fantastic actually to see. Super big thanks to Padraig. As always, you get lots of stuff out of it, don't you? And of course, you can find all of that on the show notes and links to the conversation with him on our website at ecommercepodcast.net/46. You, I think, will be learning this URL by now if you've stuck with us this far. And if you have, stay with us because we have another great guest lined up. So let's check in with Ian Moyse, who is a technical sales leader and social influencer. Always love my conversations with Ian, and this one is no exception. What lessons are you taking from 2020 into 2021? What are the sort of the key things that you think actually this is really cool, I'm taking this forward?
I think some really basic things, to be honest. Don't take things for granted. Be prepared to be agile and accept change. I mean, how many people plan to change, plan to do something differently, never get around to it, and think about how you can develop yourself. Something I've said during this, and we may have spoken about when I spoke before, is if you're in work and working fully now, you'll have to do things differently. Accept change. Accept that you're at home. That's a big change. If you're not, and you've either looking for a role or you've been furloughed, don't just sit on your laurels. I think it's far too easy for people to sit back and go, well, I have to wait it through or put a little bit of effort in. Put full effort in. You've still got, look at all the time you've been handed. You've been given, look on the positive. You've been given all this time. Yes, look for another role, and don't be despondent that there's no roles out there. Pivot yourself. What else can you do? I wouldn't suggest necessarily, from what I've heard, using the government site that recommends a new role, because it's providing some interesting alternatives for people. But think about, okay, you've got skills. No matter what you've been doing, you've got skills and experience that are transposable. Yeah. And if you're a hard worker and committed, people are going to see that. So make an effort. Continue to every day, because at some point someone's going to interview you, and you want to be able to say, well, what were you doing? Well, every day I spent 3 hours proactively looking for new roles and applying, and at least you've got a story to tell that's positive, and learn a new skill. Yeah. I've gone through, I'm pretty sure we'd have spoken, but I found that in the Salesforce area, for example, there's a free education thing you can go through called Trailblazer. So and you get to a Ranger status, the highest badge. I've done that 3 times now. I'm triple Ranger during COVID, and I've been working, but I've been thinking, what do you want to come out of this? Saying, in that period, if anyone asks you, what do you want to say? Well, don't have a good answer. Or do you want to say, no, I did this, I learned a new language, or I did whatever, I developed myself. That you've got a fantastic positive story to come out of it, and you'll feel better through it, right? Because you've done something every day rather than sat and watch Netflix, which is easy to fall into. Yeah, no, it is very, very good, very wise. What advice would you give to somebody who knows they need to change, but like a lot of people struggle to change? You go through this process of change. You obviously are going to be like the rest of us and struggle with change. What do you do differently? Small, bite-sized chunks. I think people try and bite off more than they can chew, and that's the problem, right? And I'll give an easy example, and I'm the same. Procrastination is easy. When there's a big job to do, and that is going to be a huge thing to climb, you never want to start it, because you think, well, when I start, I've now got to deal with this. rather than breaking it down. So, for example, I have to write blogs, etc. You sit there with a white piece of paper, and it's I'll do it tomorrow. Is write down the notes in it, right? Don't start writing the blog thinking, I'll start paragraph 1. Just think ideas, bang idea. Just throw stuff onto the page. Go and find a stat. Go and find and so you've got stuff on a page. It doesn't make sense. It's not in a constructed order. It's not how you want it to be, but you haven't got a blank page anymore. Then you start formulating, well, actually, I could start to say this at the beginning. So it's that nudging forward a little bit at a time, rather than treating something as a big job. Because if you want to change whatever it is, and it's just this huge job, you never get around to starting. It's the mountain climb, right? If you don't take the first step, you'll never climb the mountain, because you just keep looking at it every day going, one day I'll climb that, and you never do. Take a step, that's one. Now take another step. Now another. It's breaking it down into chunks and things you can do. Because I always find whenever it looks like a big thing, don't we all put it off? Oh, yeah. We'll get to that later. I'll do the easy thing now. I'll do these 10 easy jobs, but the big one I'll do later. And when do you get to it? Start the big. Very good. Break it out into smaller things.
Yeah, the power of the small step.
Yeah.
Very good. Love that. The power of small steps. Ian's great, isn't he? Well, of course he is. We get great guests on the show just for you. So, of course, it's going to be good. But you can, of course, find out the notes from our conversation and the links to Ian if you want to connect with him, all in our show notes, which you know by now, ecommercepodcast.net/46. Just head on over there. Now, to bring on my next guest is Nancy Badillo, or Badillo, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Now, Nancy was a recent guest, actually. She was only with us in episode 41, where we had an absolutely fantastic conversation talking about Pinterest and Etsy, and I learned a whole bunch of stuff, let me tell you. I love that show, love talking with Nancy. So, for you who are like me and love Nancy, here is some more Nancy. The question is really simple. What are you taking from 2020 into 2021?
Okay, so what I think I'm taking from 2020 to 2021 is that you have to put yourself out there. I think for many years, I wasn't brave enough to be in front of the camera. I wasn't brave enough to do, especially now with the technology, everything like TikTok, when it comes to Reels, when it comes to video, webinars, you have to make sure that you are present all the time in your business. And just doing behind the scenes is not enough to grow a business. So for me, what I'm taking for 2021 is that I'm going to do more podcasts. I'm going to put myself out there more. I'm going to do more live webinars. I'm going to do Facebook Lives, Instagram Lives, anything and everything that is going to potentially reach more people. And in the future, what I really want is to be on the Tech Talk and share my story and my journey. So I know that the way to reach the masses is to get out there in front of a lot of people. So that's what I'm taking in 2021.
Fantastic. That's great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I love the drive. I'm just going to do a TED Talk. Why not? Go for it. Have at it.
I can barely speak English, but I'm going to do it.
Thanks, Nancy. Now, if you listened to episode 41, you will know that Nancy at the time was just about to release her course on Etsy, which she has done now. And I signed up for it, and I've actually been working through it with my 13-year-old daughter. Oh, yes, we've been having a great time doing that. It is honestly a great course, so comprehensive. I have never, ever seen anyone update their course as much as Nancy does. She is continually bring in huge amounts of value. So do check it out. And if you want to know more about that course, if you want to know more about Nancy, of course, as always, the links will be in today's show notes. Just head on over to, say it with me, ecommercepodcast.net/46. Now, before we bring on the next guest, let me just take a minute to thank this show's sponsor. Let me give a big shout out to one of our show sponsors, Kurious Digital. You know what? I love its flexibility. It's such a great platform. You know how when you start out, you might typically use an online platform because they're cheap, they're easy to use, super accessible. But you know what? They aren't that flexible. And as your business grows, you end up moving to an agency, right? because that's just what you do. And at some point, you're going to have this nightmare to deal with, and it can be incredibly expensive. And the thing for me that I love about KD is it will grow with you. You can start out on the platform easily, and as your business grows, then KD will adapt with you. Now, I don't know of any other platform that does all of that. So if you're in the market for a new e-commerce platform, make sure you follow the links from mattedmondson.com. Take advantage of the offers that they've got for you, and let me know what you think. Okay, big thanks to Kurious Digital for sponsoring today's show. We will, of course, put a link to Kurious Digital in the show notes, so you can find out more about that on our website, ecommercepodcast.net/46. Now, let's bring on our next guest, which is going to be Meyrick D'Souza, who was featured on the show way back in episode 26, where we talked about the weapons of influence and how to apply them to our own e-commerce business. I have to be honest, I loved this show. It was a great show, and it was great to speak to Meyrick again and catch up. So without further ado, here's an excerpt from our conversation. What are you carrying forward to next year? What do you think next year is what are some of the keys, I think, for you for 2021?
What are we carrying forward? So obviously I'm not working right now. So I haven't, been working over the lockdown period. I think there are a couple of big changes that we're seeing. So obviously we've seen a rise in the amount of focus on digital. Mm-hmm. But I think that there's a growing trust in automated activities and the use of bots and things like that, because that's the only way that organizations are able to scale to meet to have met the kind of growing demand that's happened. So for example, because so many more people have been calling Amazon or whatever other e-commerce site they've been using, there's been a greater demand for e-commerce for customer support, and a lot of these companies haven't been able to do that by manning phones or chatbots, so they're actually using automated features for managing issues, and that I think has created a great acceptance of automation as a means of engaging people and driving customer experience. Mm. And so I think that'll be one of the things we see in 2021 is a greater reliance and greater acceptance of chatbots and more automated activity as a way of engaging people. I think a lot of people actually prefer sometimes using chatbots as a quicker way to find out what they to find the solution that they need. As long as their problem isn't completely outlandish, or they actually need to talk to somebody. If it's something that's a kind of regular issue, then you expect it to be solved more easily, and you don't necessarily want to talk to somebody to explain it.
Yeah, that's very true, and I think you're right. I think actually that's a really good observation that there is a growing acceptance now amongst users that actually talking to a machine is fine, and in most cases works very, very well. And so machine learning, AI, the sort of the new trends which are hitting the world and e-commerce, is certainly involved in that. Actually, how that integrates and how that works with your online business, I think, is quite fascinating, isn't it? And so you're right. I think we will see a growing trend in it. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. He was telling me about something I think Tesla did, whereby they've got some AI project going on. Maybe it wasn't. I can't remember who it was. Anyway, in effect, the whole purpose of this piece of AI was to write content, like blog posts and stuff, where we kind of spend hours researching, and we spend money on copywriters and so on and so forth to write blog posts. Well, now a machine did it, and I think it was they put a post on something like the Huffington Post or some kind of well-known, well-established site, and no one guessed it was AI. Everyone thought it was a genuine, published article.
One of those pieces on Twitter. I got quite a bit of engagement, and there's an article written by that basically said, this is written by a bot, but you would never guess it. And I think the Guardian wrote about it as well.
Yeah.
I think, the philosophy for many years when it comes to customer service was to limit how many people actually you had to talk to, whether it's through FAQs or through, phone systems where you have to select different options. But I think now businesses are realizing that they don't need to limit how many people they talk to. They can actually scale more easily, and that's a better strategy.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping to see that as being a big change.
That's really interesting.
And the fact that of course you don't need to be in Amazon to be able to scale easily using technology. I think you're seeing a lot more companies realize that.
Yeah.
And benefit from it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That's fantastic. So what else do you see for 2021?
Well, the other thing that I'm hoping for is that organizations will understand the need to humanize the brand. So I think a lot of people want to feel that the organizations they rely on feel their pain, and they treat them in a way that's more human and less corporate. That's a growing need. I think that's an opportunity for organizations to really change how they communicate and to use less corporate speak and to be more human and more real and more empathetic with their customers. So I'm looking for that as being a bigger change. I'm sort of seeing some signs of that in some organizations that are paying attention.
How do you see that? How do you see that being outworked?
Being outworked?
Yeah.
How do you mean?
As in, if you're going to humanize, if we're going to start to see people humanize the brand more and more, what are some of the ways you think people could or should do that?
Well, I think firstly, it can just be sort of tone of voice. And I think your engagement strategy, right? I mean, just think about it less in terms of saving money and trying to get rid of people or solve problems as quickly as possible, and actually building loyalty, building relationships with people, and seeing the opportunity of doing, for doing that, but also realizing that being more human is becoming more of a necessary activity, and that you lose business if you don't. So I think the main way that's expressed is through your tone of voice, but also the kind of words you use, the language you're using, the imagery you're using, as well as thinking about how you engage with your customers. And also thinking about how you use your employees better. So I think part of the strategy is not just thinking about engagement of customers, but engagement of employees as well, because they are often your frontline staff. So how you actually engage them and make them feel more able to talk to customers and feel more purposeful in what they're doing, then the more likely people will feel that your brand, your company is being authentic. So authenticity is what is what you then bring. So looking for ways to be more authentic with customers.
So do you think then, bringing it back to what you said at the start, because I like the sound of this, you humanize your brand. It's worked very well for Jersey, my beauty company, and I agree with you. People buy and people connect with authentic voices. They connect with authentic companies very well. So do you see that there's a tension that arises between humanize the brand, but also this rise in chatbots and machine learning, which are clearly not human, machines trying to mimic humanity, I suppose, in some respects. So do you see is there a tension there, or can that be managed?
It can be managed. I mean, obviously, authenticity is important. So you don't pretend the chatbot is a real human being. But the way that the chatbot responds to people and the kind of language it uses can mimic human interactions. And actually, a certain amount of humanity in your chatbot's important, but not too much, because that becomes really creepy.
Yeah.
So that's one thing they found, not just with chatbots, but with robotics as well. So you're aware, or you've heard of the robots, so for example, the robot dogs that are used to work with elderly people for companionship. Some of the research they've shown is that if the dog is too empathetic, it actually comes off badly. It feels really creepy. So getting the right balance is important.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's how people feel at the end of the interaction, right? And that's how you're humanizing brand and thinking about the emotions that you're eliciting. So it's not just about having a human face. It's making sure that you're sensitive to the emotions that you're creating in people and doing that in an authentic and deliberate way. So when you're using a chatbot, be authentic, tell people that this is a chatbot, make sure they understand that if they need to escalate it to a human being, they can. So they understand the process they're going to go through at the beginning. And not try to obfuscate or to make life more difficult for people. Make it easier for people to get what they need, rather than trying to hide and deal with issues in the most efficient way. So thinking really about effectiveness rather than just efficiency.
Okay.
Effectiveness through using time you have available to engage people to actually delight them and win their loyalty, and seeing the longer term impact of that.
So, it's great. Wonderful. Can I ask you maybe one more question on this? What do you think? It's interesting. Like we've just come through, or are coming through the pandemic, and it's been the most incredible and unusual year. What are some of the key lessons that you've learned in the midst of all of this, in the midst of this pandemic, and what has 2020 taught you?
Oh, goodness me. There's so much that we won't understand what we need to learn from 2020 for a while. I think it'll take a long time for it to reveal itself. We'll have to see how people's work habits change. Will we go back to the previous way of living and working and the expectation that we will always travel to work every day? Or will people actually want to spend more time at home and work from home? Specific industries are going to change. So we've got to understand that. We know, for example, that a lot of retail business and restaurant businesses have been hurting, especially the ones in city centres, because people aren't travelling there anymore. So how will that change the high street in big urban areas? I think that's still to reveal itself. But certain industries have benefited. A lot of tech industries have benefited. A lot of gaming industries have benefited. But what's the long-term impact going to be for travel and the full ecosystem of businesses that evolve around travel? I think that's going to be huge. Will we see a return to people taking holidays in their own country? So one of the things that's been happening over the last sort of 10 years has been that tourism's almost become too much. There were a lot of places a lot of famous tourist destinations like Venice and Rio and places like that were saying we have too many tourists. We don't want tourists. So will that kind of flatten out, and will tourist destinations spread more evenly? And that has a lot of implications as well for other businesses within the sort of travel ecosystem. Airbnb, I don't know how they will evolve. So everyone wants to know really everyone wants to know what lessons they've got for 2021. I feel that no one can really tell. You might have some specific insights into your industry. A lot of people like Mark Ritson, if you know Mark Ritson, sort of are saying that nothing will change, and to some extent he's right. In the bigger picture, things won't necessarily change, but people's habits will change, and that will impact some industries. But I think the full understanding of those changes we won't see for maybe 2-3 years. I don't think that we'll see any big changes in 2021. I think the changes that we will see will happen in the longer term.
Yeah.
So I'm not exactly answering your question, but
no, it's fascinating, isn't it? And I think it's interesting. Everybody I've asked this question to talks about, will work return back to normal? It's one of the big things, one of the big questions. What's going to happen to work? Will we go back to being in an office 9 to 5? And what's going to happen to travel and tourism is another popular question we just don't know. I think everyone's agreed that digital seems to be a good way forward. That's one of the big things that we've learned is actually digital, I think, has been accelerated in a lot of people's minds and a lot of businesses. So the move to digital, the desire to do digital better has been one of the big trends, I think.
I think one thing that we have to understand is that the volatility of the market, I think that won't necessarily settle down. And I think people have to anticipate more volatility, which means you need to be able to respond quickly. And that means that traditional ways of marketing, which takes longer to plan and to change, will be hit. And one of the advantages of digital, which is being able to monitor things in real time and change things in real time, will be seen as a place to play. But also, as a result of that, people thinking about their data strategy will put data more at the forefront. So people need to be paying more attention to their data strategy, how they're collecting it, and making sure that they are able to put the right insights into the right hands in a timely way, so that people can adjust more quickly. So I'm hoping that you'll see, because I've always been a big fan of data, and I'm hoping you'll see more companies realize that they need to have a better data strategy, from thinking in terms of how they capture it, how they store it, and how to make it available, and the kind of insights they drive from it, to make it more fit for purpose. And think less about big data and more about the right data. But that I think is a imperative now, and hopefully more businesses will see that. So companies that can help, or consultants and suppliers that can help companies solve that problem, I think will do well. Another thing I think is that people will start looking at side gigs much more. I mean, that's obviously
side gigs.
So that's obviously been a growing trend, but I think that'll grow even more. And you'll see people maybe opt out of doing the normal 9 to 5 and instead rely on having a number of different side gigs to make ends meet.
That's a really interesting observation. I think you're right. I think people are just very, very wary of putting all their eggs in one basket, aren't they, at the moment? And,
exactly.
Yeah.
That has implications for social policy as well. It's not just sort of business, but it has implications for the insurance business, for travel. I mean, for commuting, for example.
Yeah.
And as I said before, for the restaurant and retail business. So, yeah. And then also, will people want to move away from cities more? That has been a trend over the last few years, but will that increase? Where, I think there's a lot less centralization in big cities, and that's been a move for the last few years. I think that'll probably accelerate.
Yeah. No, interesting. Very, very interesting. Thanks, Meyrick. Thanks again for being on the show. Always good to have you back. Always good to reconnect. And if you want to know more about Meyrick, all of his info, etc., you know it by now, is going to be in the show notes at ecommercepodcast.net/46. Now it's time for our final guest of the show. And you could argue we've been saving the best for last. I wouldn't, because all of our guests are fantastic, but I could appreciate why you might argue that. This is Neil Roberts. Now, I spoke to Neil back in episode 31, where we talked about customer focus. And at the time, Neil worked for Moo. That's right, the huge company moo.com. But he has since moved on to bigger and better things. So I was super keen to catch up with Neil. So here's our conversation.
Not a lot. There's not a lot that I necessarily want to take. I think probably more an attitude that actually you can deal with the unexpected. So from my point of view, I'm now in a different business and working with a different set of individuals, a great team, and there as a business are selling a fairly different range of products than they were at the beginning of the year, and growth is coming from a very different place for them. And even with the company that I worked at before, they're actually they've had to make some very difficult decisions, but they're going to be in a good place again. So I think it's a sense of resilience, a sense of, actually we can deal with this kind of stuff and this kind of change. So I think that's probably a renewed attitude towards change, more willing to just get stuck in rather than, I think there's always a tendency you sit there and mope around for a bit. So more it's like, okay, this is what it is, let's deal with it, what can we do about it? So I think that's probably the attitude I'll take forward. And that's probably it, I think, from 2020.
Just leave the rest in 2020.
Yeah, I think, it's the past. You can't change it. You've got to move forward, haven't you?
Well, there is that. What's that verse that says, forgetting those things which are past, I press on towards the prize of the upward call, or something like that. It's very much about forgetting the past, isn't it, and striving towards the future. Yeah. No, that's a good answer. That's a very good answer. So what are you most excited about for next year?
I think it's just I've joined a great business, which just has a huge amount of opportunity. So that in itself is really exciting, and working with a really, really nice bunch. So I think it's just realizing that opportunity. So you can go in there, because I've worked in businesses, earlier in my career that was sort of, 10, 15 people. So I've kind of seen the stage before Papier. And then I've spent probably the last 10 or 12 years in businesses of where they, in terms of the size, where they aspire to be. So I kind of have the before and after, and then it's how can I help them along that journey, which is really exciting, because I can hopefully help them avoid a lot of the problems that I've spent a big part of the last 10 years trying to deal with. But again, don't do that. Don't do that, because it'll end in this. So I feel a little bit like, while there's always a lot of uncertainty with certain elements, I've got a sort of a secret crystal ball of, right, actually, if you do this and you do that, I can predict that, you'll have some issues here. So hopefully being able to get in a business at this stage of growth and help that growth happen much faster, without some of the, I suppose, the challenges that can present when you're doing it for the first time.
Yeah. No, that's a really good answer. So, it sounds ideal in some respects. You're in a fast-growing company. There's a lot going on. You've got a lot to bring and offer to that company, and it's doing some good stuff. So it's a fun place to be, isn't it? And I think this is a common theme that I hear amongst digital folks, is actually life at the moment, because it's busy, because we've got COVID, actually for them can be a lot of fun because of the opportunity and the scope of stuff that they're dealing with. In the midst of the turmoil that the country is facing, I'm having fun. I feel a little bit guilty, I'm not going to lie, but it's kind of like this is quite extraordinary, isn't it? They're quite extraordinary times.
I think they are. I've worked in a number of businesses where they've, gone through periods of not having fun times, and trading difficulties, or just how to get through to profitability, and they aren't fun places to be. There's no denying. But you do learn a lot when you're there, and you do get a sense of resilience out of doing it. So yeah, it's really nice to be in a business where you don't have to worry so much about that, because it just feels that much easier, if that makes sense. So I think going through growth gives you even more opportunities to explore and experiment, because you're a lot less risk averse than in businesses I've been in the past. So yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, that sounds really, and you're right. There's I think when you're in the tough times, when it's hard and you grind it out, that's when resilience, you develop a resilience, don't you? So when it is growing, when things are easier, actually you become much better equipped to deal with that.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just sounds almost sadistic to say, but I think it makes a stronger person. So I almost wish that you go through that at some point, and I pretty much everybody will, whether it's through a personal or a business kind of things. They'll go through those tough times and they're miserable. But yeah, you do come out the other side when you come out the other side, and it does give you a sort of a confidence to deal with change generally. and a sort of a steadiness and calmness when things aren't looking so great, because you have a reference point and you have the confidence that actually you did, or that business did come through that. So it's that light at the end of the tunnel, which I think gives people hope. And I think there's a lot of people that when they come back and reflect on this period, it sounds quite trite actually, but I've had periods where I've been out of work for quite extended periods, and when you're in it, it's utterly miserable. But I look back at it now, and I'm not sure I would change it, which sounds very odd to say. Because I've been there on the kitchen table phoning up, trying to get through to recruiters to get jobs for months on end, and not really getting anywhere, and being, a kind of a month away from defaulting on the mortgage. And it's miserable. There ain't no lying about that. But yeah, you kind of, I think, get a new perspective, having been through, looking for a job again recently, is you take a lot of it less personally. I think the second or third time round, and you realise that actually there's a lot of businesses that are just making decisions to try and survive, because if they don't, then even more people are going to be impacted. And I'm not sure I would necessarily end up in the place I am with the career I am without having gone through all of that. So I'm sure it's not fun for a lot of people, but I think there's opportunity on the other side. I think staying in business is first thing is stay in business, and then you can grow and you can profit. So I think for a lot of people, it's just see this period through.
Yeah, it is. No, it's brilliant, and thank you for sharing that. That's very kind of you, and I'm sure that'll help a lot of people who are struggling. Because, as you know, on one hand, some of us are doing okay, and on the other hand, some of us are not doing okay right now. And there's winners and there's losers. But I appreciate what you said, because ultimately, have you ever heard of a guy called Admiral Stockdale, James Stockdale? He was mentioned in the book by Jim Collins, Good to Great, if you've ever read that book.
I have it on my shelf over my right shoulder. I obviously wasn't paying attention.
Obviously. It's a great book.
Guy. Is he the submarine guy?
He's the guy that was Admiral Stockdale. He was the guy that was captured during the Vietnam War.
Oh, no.
And he was, I think it was the Vietnam War, and he was imprisoned, I think, for about 8 years, tortured over 20 times. And he saw people in prison, kind of, some of them coped with prison. And let me tell you, prison during a war is no fun. I mean, prison's not great anyway, but can you imagine, there's no human rights, there's nothing, right? It's horrific. And he talked to Jim Collins about this, and Jim said to him, how did you survive something that was so horrific? And he said, well, fundamentally, I had the faith that ultimately I would prevail, and that not only I would prevail, but this would be the defining event of my life for which I would not change. Do you know what I mean? And that's a bit like you mentioned, it's a bit sadistic. It's like, but actually this is going to change my life in ways which are so much better. And that's how he got through prison. And so then Collins says to him, well, who are the people that didn't survive in prison that well? And he said, oh, that's easy. It's the optimists, which I just find the most extraordinary statement. It's the people that would just say, oh, we're going to be out by Christmas, then Christmas would come and go and they wouldn't be out. Oh, we'll be out by next Christmas, and they would come and go and they wouldn't be out. And it clearly wouldn't, do you know what I mean? They weren't dealing with the situation that was in front of them. And so Stockdale would often go around to the prisoners saying, listen, you are not going to be out by Christmas, deal with it. And so he said there's this real tension between having the faith that you will ultimately prevail, but the ability and strength to confront the brutal facts as they appear today and deal with those head on. And it's like these two things enabled him to deal with prison. I've been thinking about this a lot recently, the Stockdale paradox. These two things, the faith that you're going to prevail, the strength to confront the brutal facts.
Yeah, and I think, mine was no Vietnam War, but yeah, I can still remember it, the realization that no one was going to find a job for me. So I had to go in and confront my demons and kind of do the things that I absolutely dread, like cold calling people and going out and networking with friends of friends of colleagues of friends, which is, I absolutely hate that kind of stuff. It's like, and the sort of the initial small talk, but, to humble myself to go out and see if I could find work, So yeah, I have a lot of, I suppose, empathy for that, because I think you do need a bit of optimism, but I think you that's not enough. You need to put the graft in to turn it around, and you need to. I think that's probably the thing, is it does give you the strength to go, yes, I do have that anxiety in my stomach. I don't feel comfortable about this, but it forces you to push beyond that, and I think you do grow as a result. And then when you feel that feeling again, you're kind of, all right, I'll remember this, but I can actually, push past it. So I think I'll have to have a reread now.
Just read that little few pages, it's fine. The rest of
just a few pages. But I think you quoted it perfectly. It sounded like you've read that a lot.
Well, funnily enough, I've been doing a lot of research recently on how to overcome adversity. We've been doing a lot of stuff around that. And so, some research went into the Stockdale paradox. So that's why it's all fresh in my thinking. Well, big thanks to Neil. Always love catching up with Neil. He's such a dude, isn't he? I always enjoy my conversations with him. I always get like a million ideas when I speak to Neil. That is for sure. So a huge thanks to Neil. And of course, a huge thanks to all of my guests from today's show. It was brilliant to catch up with each and every one of you. We must do it again at some point. Now, you know what? My aim whenever I speak to guests is to always find some real practical nuggets that I can use on my own e-commerce websites, because like you, I run my own e-commerce business, and I would say we did that today. Definitely can check that off my to-do list, and so I hope you got some great stuff out of it too. If you did, then I would totally appreciate it if you could rate the show on iTunes and even share it out so we can connect with more folks around the world and grow what we are doing. Now, as I said at the start, and as I've said many times during the show, all of the notes, links and transcripts to today's show are online, and you can get them for free. Just head on over to ecommercepodcast.net/46 to get them. Thanks for listening, and come back next time as we get to interview some more great guests. We're going to get into part 2 of this discussion, all about, what are we taking from 2020 into 2021. So thanks for being with us. My name is Matt Edmondson, and we will be back again very, very soon.
You've been listening to the eCommerce Podcast with Matt Edmondson. Join us next time for more interviews, tips, and tools for building your business online.